Hello, I'm John J. Thompson, and on this episode of the True Tunes podcast, I am thrilled to invite a longtime friend and a fantastic singer-songwriter, Jennifer Knapp, to my home in East Nashville for a long, expansive conversation about her life, her career, her music, and the various complications and adventures she has encountered along the way. Some will know Knapp for her breakthrough albums The Way I Am or Lay It Down, or her debut Kansas, which she recently re-recorded with Steve Hindalong and a cast of all-star friends for its 25th anniversary.
I've exhausted every possible solution. I've tried every game there is to play. In the search for a Christ-like perfection, I'm convinced I've only left my God ashamed. I cry, I wonder, can he hear my despair? Afraid to lift my hands, afraid he doesn't care. And if he answers and I fall again, can I still be his daughter? Can I still depend on him? When I'm down, I search every mistake. I'm looking for new regrets. Sometimes I forget that his grace is sufficient for me, that it's deeper, wider than I can conceive. His grace is sufficient for me.
Others may only know her as a former contemporary Christian music singer who came out as gay, but still clings to her faith and continues to speak out about it and to advocate for LGBTQ issues. What was it like for her to go back and revisit songs from 25 years ago? How does she approach the craft of writing differently today than she did when she was starting out? Some of you might not know who she is at all, but hopefully you'll find this combination of ideas interesting. We'll talk about it all and let you hear a lot of her amazing music and a brief check-in with Hindalong about going back to Kansas throughout this extended show. Because one thing I am sure you will find is whether you agree with her or not, Jen is smart, funny, talented, and warm. And extended conversations in living rooms are a lot different than posts on social media. Everything happens after we take care of a little bit of housekeeping. And we're back. Before we head into the living room, I'd like to set the stage a little bit. In the mid-90s, when the original iteration of True Tunes was at its peak, we often got dozens of CDs and tapes from independent artists weekly. There were bins full of them in the back room. It was not uncommon for us to have a backlog of hundreds waiting to be listened to. For a long time, I listened to every single submission myself, but eventually, with the pressures of running the store and publishing the magazine taking more and more time, I just couldn't keep up. I empowered my staff, and sometimes friends whose taste and discernment I trusted, to listen and pull out the ones I really needed to hear.
Just when I think I got it, it's gone. When I think I know the answer and I dare to raise my hand, it's wrong. Stop this foolish pride of mine that dares to drag me far away from you. When I try to do it my way, I always lose your point of view. I don't have to be condemned. Jesus saved me from the laws of sin. If I thought I'll try again, with that Spirit as my guide, I'll never have to hide again.
I'll never forget when Wheeze, aka Wheezy B, the young woman and good friend I had tapped to manage the store as I spent more time overseeing the club and magazine, came to me with a project from a Kansas-based singer-songwriter named Jennifer Knapp. She told me I had to listen to it. I was busy at that moment, but promised her I would. No, she said, you need to listen to this right now. She wanted my permission to call and order some of Jen's tapes or CDs to stock in the store, and to tell her we would write about it in the magazine. I remember telling Wheeze that if she was that passionate about it, I didn't even have to listen. She could make that call. She beamed and left my office. I think I waited to listen to Knapp's demo until my drive home, but when I did, my respect for Wheeze's discernment went up a notch. This Knapp girl was on another level. Wheeze was right about Knapp, of course. We wrote her up and sold her stuff as an indie before she signed with Goatee Records and released her debut LP. Kansas came out in 1998, right after the True Tune store and club closed. That record was a smash hit, certified gold, and it landed Knapp smack dab in the middle of the contemporary Christian music late 90s explosion. Jen found herself on a wild ride for the next few years, until suddenly disappearing from the scene altogether for 7 years. There was a strong resurgence of what some called neo-folk music in the 90s. While this strain of acoustic-based songwriting certainly hearkened to earlier styles, there was something new about this version of it. Artists like Suzanne Vega and the Indigo Girls rekindled the stripped-down, confessional style of writing that songwriters like Joni Mitchell and James Taylor had popularized 25 years earlier. But it's important to realize that Joni, James, Carol, and Kat were not the inventors of folk music at all. They were, in fact, building upon and modernizing the style that had been popularized by the folk singers of the 50s and 60s. The neo-folk era was simply Gen X's version of an approach to music that had always been around. In the 90s, though, the style took on more of an edge. When I heard Jen Knapp, with her muscular voice and dynamic guitar approach, she often sounded like a band unto herself. I thought she had a shot at a major label mainstream career.
When you think of all you've traded, let me wonder why you've waited for me to lock it down. That there's a ring that's on your finger, remind you that love comes back around. Oh, that love comes back around.
I had my wife Michelle join us for this conversation, both because she has been around for the whole story and because as a woman who is a songwriter and artist, I was pretty sure she would bring some important thoughts and ideas into the room, which she did. So now, join Michelle and I as we welcome Jennifer Knapp into the front room of our East Nashville home for an extended conversation over coffee and tea.
Sister, remember I let you down. Tell by the fact you'll never come around. You don't have to say a thing. I can tell by your eyes exactly what you mean. That it's trying to get down on my knees and pray. Lord, I'm moving. Put away my flesh and bones. Here you go. The Spirit through me, Lord.
Well, Jen, thank you for coming over all the way over here to East Nashville from
I'm so
West
excited
Nashville.
to hang out with you,
I know,
man.
it's been too long. I mean, when we moved to Nashville 17 years ago, one of the people I was most excited to reconnect with was you, and you weren't.
I was
even
gone,
around. You were
man.
gone.
I was out.
But we go back. I mean, we were selling your music at True Tunes when you didn't even have a record deal. It was just a cassette that you had done.
Oh wow, you had the
Yeah.
cassette. Yeah, because I'd been doing it. I think I try to remember when I kind of started getting out, but I think my first recorded thing was in '96, and like I think a lot of times people don't understand how fast I like.
Oh, yeah.
One, I had an indie career before I started, like, but it was a really packed indie career for a couple of years. And what's interesting to me about that is there were so many places like True Tunes and what you were doing there in Chicago and Cornerstone, that there was this indie Christian music scene happening around the country. And I got tucked into that for a couple of years, and it was super fun. You know, all hanging out with your peers. We're all kind of grungy and dirty, have no idea about photo shoots and autograph lines and any of that stuff. We're all just getting together in like whatever hole in the wall place we could get, you know, plug into. And it was super fun. And those are the days, I mean, yeah, hanging out with you, just like it made me feel like this was something I could do. Like I saw Nashville, and you know, and I'm not trying to disparage popular music that was coming out of Word Records or any of that, but I didn't relate as a young, you know, as a young kid with like more scratches on my legs than, you know, hairspray in my hair. I don't know. Like I didn't know how to relate to Avalon or Point of Grace. And while you know, I might have liked something in that vein, I was just like, I was way too dirty and way too road savvy, I think, because you're just chucking your stuff into the back of the car and you're just going to hang out with your friends. And it's most of the places we were playing were pretty dirty.
If I run around like joy in the sunlit rain, would you laugh with me? What do I do to make you laugh? What do I do to make you smile? Whoa, if only for a little while, sing out in joy. Let the silence cease, let the seas roll. Sing out in joy, hold your breath no more for the Savior.
Tell me about the music you were doing. It definitely fit into, because okay, here's what I remember you telling me when the first time we hung out. You were like a band kid, like you were, and you got
I was a trumpet player.
Trumpet player, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
like a classical music nerd.
Right, and you got to school playing music, but not guitar.
No, I
not
had no idea
songwriting.
how to play.
So who were you listening to that you said, okay, I can do this, I want to do this, I'm going to start writing songs?
You know, if I'm really honest, I never thought in that way. The path that I've taken into the performance that I do now was largely through the encouragement of my Christian friends who were in that space of going, now that you're a Christian and you're doing music, you can only do Christian music. Like that's where the people that I was in and living around in my hometown. So they were discouraging me from the noodling that I was doing in the dorm rooms of playing like cowboy junkie songs, which were really approachable for me. They were usually like 3-chord songs, D-A-G kind of stuff. So they were really good primers to kind of get my bearings. But I had no aspirations at all of a pop star life or even songwriting. I was a trumpet player. I'd gone to school. I knew I was going to be in music education in somewhere, I thought. And the guitar thing for me was just trying to get my bearings around this stringed instrument because I'd never played a stringed instrument before. So it was my Christian friends that kind of started angling me to kind of start actually
playing guitar better and singing in worship bands and things like that. And even like some of the songwriting I did was more channeled into my friends who said, hey, come join a band, because I sang okay for them. It wasn't until I started playing in these Christian spaces that my friends were like, okay, ditch the band, you come with your guitar. And it's kind of what it did, because the bass player in my band, I was in this band called Captured. You would have never heard anything. We never recorded anything. I remember you telling me about this. Yeah, but my bass player in that band ended up, it was like a mini insurrection that happened inside of it, because he's like, you should really think about doing this by yourself. And he started booking me these little gigs in and around. He was responsible. We recorded that cassette in this farmhouse in Scammon, Kansas. Byron Funk is the guy's name. He's a fantastic guy.
I remember Byron, yeah.
And went on to record my second indie record, which was a CD called Wishing Well. Right. Going back to what you were asking, like, I grew up listening to kind of what I listened to in my regular life. I was listening to Cowboy Junkies. Tracy Chapman was a revelation to me. And this was like when she came out with that Fast Car record when I was toward the tail end of high school. And for me, I think that was one of the first times a light bulb went off. And this is a little revisionist history, but a light bulb went off on like powerful women. Like I started to kind of notice women doing their art independent or in the spotlight alone, away from men. Not like, dudes in bands, which I had plenty of those that I liked. I grew up kind of listening to The Cure and The Smiths and The Replacements and Paul Westerberg. Right. But what I really loved in that time were the things that were driving to the acoustic side of the art. So like Paul Westerberg and The Replacements were rock and roll, but you hear so much acoustic. And then I was well on the road and kind of well into my independent life, maybe two or 3 years. And then Patty Griffin came out with a record called Living with Ghosts. Right. And it was basically a demo record of just her and her acoustic. And you can even hear like sirens of dogs in the background, right? Yeah. And it had probably been out for a while, but a kid came to a show and said, hey, you remind me of. And I rushed out, went and got this record. And all of a sudden, like, yes, I'd been playing and yes, I'd been working. But when I heard like just a woman and her guitar, I mean, that was one of the moments where I'd have to look in what year that record came out. But that was a year, I think, even after I'd been working for 2 or 3 years in this, I went, I want to do this. Like, I loved the way that she just punched you in the face with an opening line. And I want my lyrics to, I don't want to give up on my lyrics. I really want people to feel, and I want them to cut. And when I play it and I go out on stage, I want to saw through this thing so you feel that too. Like, I don't want to give you any way out. And Patty Griffin was one of those records I remembered, kind of like moving from loving and enjoying music as a listener and then seeing a performer do that. I'll finish with this. I think particularly as I was moving into Christian circles, where a lot of women are, a good woman is a polite and quiet woman. And I mean, obviously I'm kind of laying on a little bit thick, but it's also a reality for a lot of women, like strength, perseverance, like a sense of certainty or a sense of like autonomy going, this is what I'm good at, or I want to, any sense of self-pride I was in the middle of this discipleship kind of space where I was learning Christianity and people were kind of going, no, you have to tamp you down. Right. And then I saw other artists kind of doing something wildly different. And so, yeah, there were no models of that in where I was headed with music. I don't think that I thought, I will revolutionize anything. There was some part of me, though, that in that space and listening to artists like that, giving you a model, right? To be able to see somebody in the world that exists that not just inspires you, but gives you something to aim for that you recognize in yourself, or maybe you don't yet recognize in yourself. And that's one of the records that I remember for sure that I stopped feeling insecure about going out and being a solo acoustic artist, because I still, even to this day, spend most of my time just me and my guitar on stage.
I've got faith that moves the mountains, I got hope. I've got hope that fills the sea. I see his hands. Well, his scars are worse than mine. I see his blood, redder than any wine, shed just for me. shed just for me. I trust He will return for my relief. The words that Jesus said for my beliefs, that nothing is impossible, impossible for me. Nothing is impossible, impossible for me. I've got faith that moves the mountains. I've got hope that fills the sea. Nothing is impossible for me, impossible for me. Impossible, impossible, impossible for me.
You struck me as someone, and we're not that far apart in age, but you were listening to groups like The Replacements, and you were trying to find, or the Bodines and things where it was like,
Bodines are hanging out, yeah.
You know, stuff that was like, there's an acoustic guitar driving the rhythm.
Violent Femmes.
Violent Femmes, which is one of my all-time favorites. There's an acoustic guitar driving this, but how do you imitate or bring that band feeling when there's not a band? How do you play rhythmically? And I noticed every time I saw you getting more muscular with the rhythms, but still having like range in how you played, where most people that were singer-songwriters, the acoustic guitar was either finger style, like showing how dexterous they were, or it was just framing the lyric that they were delivering. And you were working, it seems like, always to try to make that thing a band, and then you were pushing through it with your vocal, and you were owning the room, like whether you were just acoustically, or then when you started to get a band, you could actually be a rocker. Like you could really rock.
I remember a friend of mine, Levi Lowry, and I can't remember, he was quoting somebody else, but he was saying that it's often like the idiosyncrasies or the weaknesses of any player or musician that actually define them as the unique player that they are.
Right.
That was like, I didn't hear that quote till maybe in the last 10 years, but I think about that. But I also think in the same vein that the insecurities that we have in what we create, if you're a creator in some of that space, they're actually the things that drive you to create. And the insecurities that I had oftentimes was like, there's nothing I wanted less than to have somebody like, and it happened to me early in the church, one of the church gigs. I'd walk into a church gig, and you know, I'd be playing in a church, and one famous story, I had this guy goes, "Well, where's your band?" I'm like, "I don't have one. It's just me and my guitar." And he kind of looks me up and down like, "Oh, it's going to be like a girl and her guitar." And I kind of know what I suspect what he's expecting, you know, like strum, sing, songs. And, you know, I hated that. I really hated that. And he was like, "Well, where are your tracks?" I'm like, "I don't play with the bands." And I was like, "I play with myself."
Right.
And I kept saying that to over and over. I'm like, "I play with myself, dude." Right. And he didn't even laugh. He didn't even get my self-pleasuring joke. But I think that insecurity of seeing that, and having been in around, which is a very male-dominated scene with guys, and then this kind of, you could see it, like when you walk out on a stage at Cornerstone. I was a kid going there in my early 20s. And Cornerstone's a little bit of an exception because it's a very knowledgeable audience, and the expectations are high. Like, I mean, I do think people, when I was going there, people were like, "I don't know you, let me know you, show me something." Yeah. So there was something fun about that. But sometimes you go to spaces like that, and all of it, you know, like Five Iron Frenzy comes through, or the Supertones comes through, and then Jen Knapp comes up with her guitar, and you can literally see the audience shoulders just drop. And when you walk out on stage, and early on in my career, I got so many wonderful opportunities to walk out in front of rooms like that, but I was like, "No, you are not." Yeah. Like, and that insecurity, that insecurity, I didn't realize it at the time, was really driving me to think about not just how I was writing a song or what I wanted it to say. I wanted more than just girl poetry. Right. I really wanted to be able to move the room, and I knew that there's sometimes I couldn't do it vocally, or maybe couldn't do it lyrically, but I have all these things to be able to do. I can do it with my body, I can do it with my voice, I can do it with my arms and the rhythms of stuff. And now I don't work that hard especially when I listen to a lot of my early writing. In fact, Steve Hindalong, who produced the remake of Kansas, Steve and I, as we played these things around, he calls me Tricky Licks, because I have all these little turns that I did musically, because I wasn't, even like as a guitar player, at Insecurities, that I wasn't doing leads and I wasn't doing all these kind of runs up and down, because I was a new guitar player. I had chords at my disposal, but I could move my right hand and figure out how to do a rhythm in my right hand. So I would chunk those in accents and think about, in my head, I have a band. I'm playing with a band in a big group all the time, and I got to keep up with them because they're kicking ass behind me, you know? So it was just an interesting thing, I think, that developed in and around my style that I didn't appreciate until like now that I'm, gray and old and having to sing those old songs. And I'm like, man, a much younger woman wrote this, holding your breath and just, really digging into it. But it speaks to, I think, I always get really excited when I think about other musicians and going, it's not just the one thing that you do. And at the end, for me, it's always been the performance of it that has really been a little bit, has led to my being more secure in the recordings that I've done, because most of the time, by the time I get to recording, these songs have been out on the road, and I know how they work. I know who they want to talk to. I know how they speak to me, and we had this relationship. It's very physical, and it's very much about driving a lot of those elements, like being able to have a whole arc, which might lend back to my classical music kind of idea of like big, long arcs. Of thinking about where you start, where you end, what the peaks and valleys are in between, that I'm convinced you don't have to give up on a pop song.
Shine on me. Once a slave to sin, but now your God has set me free. If there's anything that I can do, Lord, anything that I can say, anything that I can do, look my way, then let it be. Let it be. Yeah, yeah.
Have you read or listened to David Byrne's How Music Works?
No, I'm scared to.
Oh, no, you need to.
I'll be so intimidated.
He has this premise that I completely buy into, which is that throughout human history, all music is really shaped by a few things. And one of them is the place that it's created. So the literal physical space, whether it's a cave or a field or whatever. The other is the purpose for which it is created. So is it designed for entertainment? Is it designed for instruction, for social cohesion? And sometimes we're conscious of those purposes and sometimes we're not.
Your education's coming out right now.
Well,
we'll turn it into one anyway.
I've been nerding about this since I was a kid instinctively, because we created True Tunes to create a space that didn't have to be a church and it didn't have to be a bar, because bars are about selling beer. Churches are about promoting and advocating for whatever that denomination is advocating. We wanted a space that was kind of a neutral space, but was still a lean-in space. People are there because they are looking for the deeper end of stuff, spiritually at least.
Yeah, and you're looking for a communal connection. Right. It's something that's definitely pulling at your inner self, like working toward your inner self. Yeah.
What's interesting about your story, and I remember us talking about this a long time ago, was that you came, if I recall correctly, you came from a family that had sort of nominal spiritual activity, if that, and then came to a deeper appreciation of that in college through a pretty engaged evangelical sort of fundamentalist kind of thing.
I didn't really know it at the time, but like now it's very recognizable as a hardcore evangelical kind of move,
And now hearing you talk about the fact that it was that community that literally told you, here's a guitar, like write songs and do this.
Yeah.
Instead of, here, compose classical music with your trumpet. And like, that's really interesting, because when you think, well, then a girl with a guitar goes and does music and shares this, you can see kind of how then that's going to have a big impact on the type of work you're going to do and the spaces you're going to do it. But I also remember how excited we were talking one time, I think backstage at Cornerstone, but it might have been in Nashville, when you did I don't remember where it was, but you did a show somewhere, and there's this huge Budweiser sign behind you. It was some mainstream festival that you got booked at, because we were thinking, we being the True Tunes world, whoever that the royal we, that Jen Knapp is one of those from our world that really probably needs to bump out to the rest of the world. Like you had the goods, like you should be singing for everybody. And we were kind of really excited when there were like most of our friends, we kind of wanted to be singing for everybody. We didn't think of this Christian music world for Christians thing. We were all about, let's sing for everybody.
Yeah.
And then you did a show, I don't remember what it was, but you were opening for somebody or whatever, but there's this, you're on a stage with a huge Budweiser sign, and it was like somebody got their somebody got their undies in a bunch over the fact that you're on a stage with a beer sign. But we were like, oh my gosh, it's bad beer, but it's a great thing. You're singing for real people.
Total shit beer, yeah.
I wanna know you.
Didn't you do like the first or second Lilith tour?
I did, yeah. It was I think it was a 99 was, I think maybe their second year. There was a lot of anticipation of that tour, yeah.
So you had some moments where you were playing your music for mainstream audiences. Yeah. And this is what I wanted to get into, was even though you were formed in a sort of a chrysalis of evangelical music, early on you were making at least attempts to sing outside of that. What was it like for you, being someone whose music was formed in that world? It seems like you were kind of interested in breaking out of that kind of early on. Was that conscious or was it coincidental? Am I reading into this like I am wont to do?
Well, I remember going to speaking of Lilith Fair, the first afternoon I was there, they have like these side stages and outsourced stages, and in Christian music, there's often very much a pecking order and a hierarchy. Who plays, when they play, and like you never bump your class. Like if you're a newbie, you play in the front. You never get squeezed in, right? Mainstream's not really like that. Like you fill the bill in the day or whatever. But as it turned out, I was playing on this stage, and Patty Griffin was playing right in front of me, and I was freaking out because I'm like, I shouldn't be playing after Patty. And as an artist now, I think, I don't want to play after Patty. It was a total different thought, but I felt like I was coming over the top of somebody I deeply respected, because that's what was ingrained in me from the Christian culture. But in playing that, I was also like, I remember like being acutely aware. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed. If I'm being honest, I was completely embarrassed that I was going to be found to be a Christian, because everybody said like, oh, here's this weird Christian act that's on this space, and then following artists like Patty, and like, it was a pretty lesbian heavy crowd that in the tours that we were doing, because the Indigo Girls were on the bill, a couple of other like really, I can't remember right now, but a couple of other, because people kind of chopped and changed as we went along the tour. But that particular run of shows I was doing there, it was quite a big, lesbian artist contingency there, or a butch kind of looking audience, according to some of my dude friends, were saying, man, this room's kind of butch. Like, but I just remember being really insecure about that. And I got thrown into a press conference. I'm sitting right between Sarah McLachlan and Sheryl Crow, and I'm like, she's not going to put up with this shit. Like, and I expected it and even the Indigo Girls were in that same presser, and I'm like, these guys are all going to look down on me, and I was embarrassed about what I was doing. I think sometimes we don't see what we're doing, or we don't all often. I get accused a lot of times of not respecting how good I am at what I do. It's the older I get, I go, oh, I know what I'm doing now, and I know what I'm good at, and I'm proud of that. But even then, I didn't really believe in myself. And I think the patina of Christianity over what I was doing made me second guess it so much that here I have this opportunity to just be myself in a world where the ideology isn't the concern. Who you are as an artist is a concern in most of the mainstream spaces. And that was one of the first times, especially among a group of women who were very much the icons of, I had a career because of most of these women that were out there. And those same women, when I walked into the room, said, knock 'em out, kid. Amy Ray comes up to me after the presser, calls me by name, and says, will you come join us on stage to sing Closer to Fine? And like the unknown, unhinged lesbian yet to come in me just freaked out. And I shared I had an opportunity to share a mic with Sarah McLachlan on stage singing Closer to Fine with the Indigo Girls. Wow. I mean, that experience for me was like, I got a lot of critique. I don't know that I saw an opportunity to go out and do that. I got invitations to go do that. Right. And when I got invitations to do that, I still didn't even see, as a young artist, I didn't see that was in any way, like, I wasn't selling enough records. Like, people weren't interested in Christian music in those environments. It wasn't like a media marketing thing or, oh, she's hot right now kind of call. Somehow or there, I was getting in and weaving into a group of women in that space that was a recognizable name. Like, there are women, there are people I know now who have a Jen Knapp record, a Sarah McLachlan record, a Tracy Chapman. I'm right in there, which blows my mind. But I didn't aspire to do that. But I think the part of it is just like that I remember that embarrassment of it, and I think now I kind of frame that in a different way, going just an absolute resistance to the idea that's even spoken to my own Christianity and my own spiritual experience. I detest the idea that we're supposed to get smaller, that we're supposed to be more exclusive, and that it's supposed to be this special space. And I think when I look back on my peers and all of us that were kind of coming up through music in time, and why our aspirations were not to get to Nashville, but to get to the world, to love music, to love people, to be excited about those moments where people dive into spiritually appreciating it. Like, there are nights I play in bars. I played in a lesbian bar that was a church. Like, a couple hundred drunk lesbians mad at me because I didn't want to play Martyrs and Thieves. And I'm afraid, like, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go into Christian whatever. I'm in a lesbian bar on a Sunday night. Like, I wanted to just have fun and play all my mainstream stuff. I put air quotes on it. And they were like, no, you will play the song that we love, because it just transformed that room. Right. And it wasn't church. It wasn't, but it was deeply spiritual. It was deeply as moving as any other, moment where at a rock concert everybody puts up their lighters and cries.
Could it be that my way should depend by the crimson-stained grace on a hand, and like a lamp on a hill, Lord, I pray in your will to reveal all of you that I can. So turn on the light, reveal all the glory. I am not afraid, to bear all my weakness, knowing in meekness I have a kingdom to give, where there is peace and love is the light, and the light, oh, I am not afraid to let your light shine bright at my life and my life, oh, there's a place in the darkness that I used to cling to presses heart hope against time.
For a long time, we said these lines are constructs that we, on the inside, we're like dogs with those invisible fence collars that have been trained that there's a fence, that there is no fence.
Yeah,
so you were feeling that collar tell you, I'm in the wrong space and I need to be insecure about this, when the people there were saying, you're welcome here and we want to hear what you have to say. And they're not as turned off by that message when it's coming from a place of authenticity as we were told they would be.
I think if I'd gone in there and tried to convert people, that might have been a different story. It's kind of one of the reasons why I've been historically been uncomfortable with evangelism, the idea that you can that I'm here with an ulterior motive to try and to bring you to some good, to like an ongoing intervention type relationship with every other human being that doesn't know your spiritual experience. I wasn't ever really comfortable with that, but I think part of it was that I had always contested it. I didn't grow up in it. And, you'd mentioned, the way that I kind of grew up with my family, like that whole everybody's praying at dinner motif of the Christian family and the Christian home. I didn't have unholy family. It just, that wasn't part of what we did. Christmas or Easter occasionally. And I had been forced into my fair share of pantyhose throughout my youth and Sunday services. But in terms of understanding the depth that I could experience out of Christianity, in my lifetime I've had to reconcile why that's so meaningful on one hand and why it's so offensive to me on the other hand.
Right.
To think that I'm going to turn into one of an elect few. To me, I wanted to blow out the walls. And I think and that showed up in my art. That showed up in what I was writing. I'm going, we say this one thing, and what does this one thing that we say really mean? I was contesting one of my own, going back and doing the re-recording for one of my old records. There's a line in Jesus Saves Me from the Laws of Sin, which is utterly evangelical. I don't theologically hold to that premise as a Christian anymore. You have to confess Lord Jesus to become, to be seen by God. I'm not in that vein anymore. Very comfortable in saying that out loud, finally. But here's this lyric in there that when I had to play that in front of rooms, I was always trying to figure out how do I, because I was singing that for some reason. I came to Christianity, it's been a life-changing experience for me. It's been enriching and rewarding, and I wouldn't change it. And I even sometimes go, why am I still here? Mm-hmm. But I can't, there's a miracle that's happened to some degree in my life, and I say that going, don't read me as reading into a supernatural miracle. Something extraordinary has happened. How do I make sense of that? And how do I talk to that? To a world who thinks that I've gone bonkers. Right? How do I share with you something about the tradition from where I receive a lot of deeply, deeply moving spiritual joy, connection, and depth to the rest of the world? My heaven is in this lifetime. I mean, it is something that has opened up my love of myself, not narcissistically, but a love and a joy of the experience of the life that I have, the relationship I have with my partner, the relationship I have with my neighbors, the relationships I have with the world. I mean, I don't know that I would have experienced that without my faith. And so I always thought about that in some way whenever I'm going and whenever I'm playing, going, when you see it or when you hear it in this song, I don't want it to be a turnoff to you. I want it to be an open door. It's an invitation to, I don't care how you get it or where you get it. Right. But when you see the sun come up in the morning and it goes through the light of the trees just right, what I hope is that you'll see that and it'll just sit you in your tracks, and you go, wow, you'll have that moment and know how to appreciate that moment and know how holy and sacred that is. You can't brand that. That's not, Christianity doesn't own that. Divinity's still a mystery to me in some way, but I'm open to that.
Well, I try to close my eyes like a child playing in the game of hide and seek, yeah. If I cannot see the Lord, surely, Lord, you cannot see me.
I'm open to those ideas. And the last thing that I wanted somebody to do is just turn it off, immediately turn it off, like I do most of the radio stations that I ever hear when I'm cruising across the country. I mean, you probably do it too. I'm going through the dial, and I only have to hear about 5 seconds with no lyrics.
Right. Oh yeah, right. We can tell.
And I know it's a Christian radio station. Right. Yeah. And then I'm like, and even if I have to wait longer than 5 seconds, it's like, and there it is. And I hate that even I'm making fun of it. Right. But what drives what I do still is that, again, it's kind of that insecurity or that tension. Is any gift that's worth its salt, you labor to not make a mockery of it. Mm-hmm. I labor in when I'm communicating in and around faith to be able to talk about it, whether it's theologically and on a mic somewhere or just amongst friends, living it out and amongst friends, to be able to do that in a way that it's not coercive, it's not trying to be influential, it's genuinely reaching in and connecting with other people on a holy level, trying to get to know one another, like really deeply connect. Mm-hmm. Not trying to transact in some way or sell or make seem right or just, or even on a moral grounds of when one should participate in and around religion. Because it's greater than that for me. Mm-hmm. It's great, like as an artist, I'm like, I don't want to be an embarrassment to my faith.
Right.
By doing something trite. Why I work really hard to find the depths of that. And, and I don't always win. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it just comes off. But I think in the long term, that drive is not a limiting scope. It's an expansive one. Right. It is one that's always challenging me as a person, when I'm engaging with that. Like, what am I trying to communicate? If there's something meaningful here, it should be meaningful to everyone, like to as many people as possible. Right. I mean, I think I love your David Byrne quote. I mean, there are times where, there are times I'll write music for a sacred space. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like for a rite or a ritual or something like that. It's meant and it's purpose built for that. And I don't have any problem with that. But I think when we're talking about artistic expression and where I spend a lot of my time, where we're writing about our lives and our experiences, and I think a lot of the peers that I grew up with, we weren't necessarily writing toward the ideology. We were writing about what that life and experience meant in our daily lives. Right. Like what was going through our heads. Who were the people we were playing for? What were the rooms? What were the spaces? What was our world like? Mm-hmm. Not what should we be trying to squeeze ourselves into. Right. It's a different move, and it's a lot of combinations of all those things that I just never really got out of. I never really got so into the church that I was ever felt like I had to appease it in that sense. I didn't desire it.
I poke my finger in your side and give an eye to how the blood it drips. Who am I to ever doubt? Open my mouth and give a shout.
It sounds like, again, because of the way you came to it, it had a transactional, missional purpose. The people that were encouraging you to do it the way they had an agenda, not a bad one, but they were saying, hey, you should do this. You're a musician and you're a girl and you're a whatever. Like, here's a way that you could do it because this fits in the construct of their understanding. Yeah. So my point is, when we think about, and I'm curious with now all this both personal experience, all these miles, all these years, you had to go through a pretty dark season. I remember when I came to town, and before we lived here, I came to town to produce a kids record for Goatee, which unfortunately has never been released. That was when the industry just kind of caved in.
Yeah.
But I tried to track you down because I wanted you to do one of the songs on it. And I was trying to find out where you were, and somebody said, well, Joey actually said, well, I think she's in Australia. And I was like, well, that's going to be difficult. But does she ever come back? Well, she might be back here and there. So I wrote to you, and then I started to hear, oh, well, she's not good. Like it's pretty, she's going through a hard time. And that's all I heard was, I think she's going through a hard time. A couple people said, well, I think she's gay.
I was actually getting pretty healthy.
I was like, oh, well, she, okay. So I wrote to you. I don't know if you ever even got it. But I wrote to like a P.O. box or something. And I just said,
yeah, no,
I hope you're okay. Here's my phone numbers and stuff. But I heard you're struggling.
Had I got it, I probably would have given you a shout. Because,
and I think I did get one message from you the day that you quit the music world. I think you sent like a message out saying, love you, I'm out, or something like that. It wasn't,
I didn't even drop the mic.
I'm out of here. And then you just went dark for a while. But you had to go through so much stuff before you could kind of reemerge. And what I wonder is, has your understanding of the purpose of art and music as a person who creates it and as somebody who studies theology, has that understanding of the purpose of art changed for you now? Do you see that art is designed, maybe even created by an intelligent being somewhere in the cosmos?
I think, yeah, I wouldn't have said that like 1,000 years ago, but I think there is a link to our creative and divinity. I mean, I genuinely, I would add into that oftentimes if there's a Christian language that says we are, made in the image of God. We are made in the image of God, having the same creative power. Like, perhaps not to create universes, but name our limitation. I mean, and to me, a human being, and this is meaning everyone who's listening, if we are not creating, we're essentially dead. Whether you're cooking in the kitchen or creating in your own mind or examining your own thought and figuring out how to fit into the world or with a neighbor, that takes a certain amount of creativity, not just a song. We always think about whether or not we're good at singing anywhere but the shower. I mean, it's not about being good, it's about being creative and being engaged and turning lights on in the room and inquiring and having curiosity and then making and then doing. Mm-hmm. Like, that has wildly changed. But in that space, when I quit I was 2002, so it's been over 20 years ago. Wow, that was a long time ago. I had such a short career, really, for as much as I talk about it. And then coming back, like when I kind of started to dust off my guitars and play again, it was a good seven years after I'd locked them up and I hadn't played. I had no calluses anymore. I hadn't sung, I hadn't done any of it because it just hurt too much. But as I started to kind of dust that stuff off and I started to write and exercise those muscles again, I could feel my body somatically telling me, this is what you do. And I'd never really thought about that before. And there's kind of like 2 points. One is the creativity point, but I'd never really thought of my person in such a way, I could get so teary about it. Like, what is my gifting? Mm-hmm. Like, what is my offering to this space? And as I was picking up my guitars and starting to kind of go, if you do this, if I write, the odds are pretty good that people are, it's weird. It seems more arrogant when I say it out loud. But it was like, if I write this, I didn't want to write because if I wrote it, people liked it. Mm-hmm. Then all my friends had ever said is, you go out and play. They would ask me to play it more. And I was like, I didn't know if I was ready for somebody to ask me for that again. So in that gift, like, what am I good at? It was the first time I'd ever really kind of entertained the idea that I might be an artist. To say that, like, I am an artist. And what does that mean? Because I knew somewhere in there, I'm like, I didn't want to just go back and entertain. Mm-hmm. I'm no good at it. Mm-hmm. I still don't want to be famous. I want to connect. I want to be engaging. I want the things that I have to offer, the test of what I'm creating is the test of its acceptance, the test of its connection in the world. Not its popularity, but whether or not it's really resonating with big, booming sound waves. Like, that's the kind of movement I want. I'm excited to be engaged in that. Popularity, marketability, I don't know. I suck at all those other things.
I'll be a ghost and fade into the shadow. Lose my color, Coca-Cola and shallow. If you won't be the one who's by my side, erase it all and let's start over. Kinder and wise and so much older. They say we'll be here for a long, long time. You can't reminisce, but you can bring it back. Oh, you'll find our dreams littered on the path. Try something new. Try something new. Try something new and let's forget the
past. Having gone through that experience enough, like apophatically, to be able to say, I know what I don't want to do, but I know that I want to do something. What then? And I think some of this comes with age and experience a little bit, but the kind of inquisition of oneself and one's work, where you go, really, what am I good at? What is my gifting? And it becomes a really critical thing, I think, particularly when I'm talking to Christian audiences who we've, and particularly women, who have often been told to kind of die to ourselves, or that pride or our autonomy are things to be feared, to actually sit and examine the unique creation that you are. To go, what are you really into? What engages your mind and your curiosity and your heart and your body enough that you would actually go sleepless, go hungry for, die for? I don't know if I'd die for music, but I mean, so that sense of getting to know that I wanted to be a part of something, I wanted to be artistic, I wanted to be creative, and the weird moment where I kind of realized that it wasn't sufficient for me to just go back and go open my guitar cases, play and make money. And I really wondered when I started back, because I didn't know, I didn't have an audience, I wasn't playing, I was just writing these songs at home. I just happen to know that there's this other life where I go out and these songs start to live.
Right.
I didn't know what that life was going to be because they hadn't met their counterparts. They're the people who listen and sing it and actually bring that song to life. I'm just little. I'm tiny in that space. I hadn't done that yet. I was just, the question, I remember just saying, I know I don't want to just make money out of this. I don't know what this is going to become, and I don't know who I'll be in that space. I just know I want to be a gift inside of that space. And if it doesn't pan out that way and I have nothing to offer, I'm okay with that too. I think as an artist and a creator, at some point you kind of go, you can write something, you can make it, but not everybody's going to eat it. You know,
Yeah.
not everything's going to be as nourishing as you hope it might be, or if it was for you. It might be just transient and ephemeral and off it goes. So I'd had enough of that wisdom, I think. But I would say now at this point, I feel like I have way more service as a musician, and way more, quote unquote, if one must say that, way more of a ministry in terms of deconstruction Christians who've been through, kind of sorting through what does it mean to have a deeply meaningful, actually materially different spiritual experience, like an experience where we know that something is shaped and crafted inside of our hearts and in our minds, that it's not as fantastic as it sounds. And it's not just ideological, and it's not just putting it on, that it's, I talk to a lot of those people that are now in this deconstruction vein, to LGBTQ people who have been through this diaspora marginalization and horrible vilification by our faces. I get to live in those spaces and see life. My side bonus really is that I get to be a witness to that, and to see how art and creativity is so critical to be able to express ourselves. And again, kind of going back to that David Byrne kind of idea, art, like to me, the art that you can paint walls and do color schemes, but it still moves us. Even a color scheme in a home opens our house up to what we will be and who we will be inside of that space. And to think about what we see and what we hear enveloping us is so critical. That the art, when I start to say I claim the artist space, artists are the people to me who are thinking about those other things. They're creators and entertainers, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. The artists are actually really kind of thinking about a lot of those dynamics across the board. and how then and the challenge then to your level of musical mastery becomes, how do you take these esoteric ideas, these spiritual ideas, how do you frame the poetry, how do you frame the music, how do you shape all of the emotional experience of humanity into a medium that is oral, or that that is oral. It's a real, it blows my mind, and I don't know that I'm it's weird when I say it, I'm like, it sounds like I'm highfalutin, but it keeps me entertained, and I'm still doing it.
Give me a chance to make it right this time. You'll be so happy. It may not be perfect, but baby, we'll be fine. You'll be so happy. You'll be pleased enough to know you're worth it, strong enough to face deserving all that you can bear. It's all I have, it's all I have to share with you. These moments fleeting, I am not the one who's leaving you out. Don't leave me out. No, just give me a chance to make it right this time. You'll be so happy. It may not be perfect, but baby, we'll be fine. You'll be so happy. You'll be pleased.
You've touched on this idea of the people going through deconstruction, the people who have a spiritual background that they're reassessing. And art, to me, is also, from the viewer's perspective, requires a certain level of discernment and assessment and engagement. Now, it doesn't if it's just wallpaper, if it's just background music, if it's just the thing designed to manipulate your emotions so that you feel scared in a certain scene of a movie, or you feel sentimental. Like, that's different, right? Yeah. But if it's actually art doing what art's supposed to do, the point is we don't have to agree. Like, we could be listening to the same piece of music, and you might say, I find it cloying. And I might say, I find it emotionally rewarding. And Michelle might sit here and go, I think the whole thing is dumb. And then what it can do is lead to a conversation where then you can talk about where you're entering it. I can talk, and actually that conversation could be more meaningful because we're all approaching that piece of art, but we're bringing ourselves to that art. And so one of the things I think, because we don't know how to engage art, we've not been taught, it's not been modeled for us, because it's been commodified so rudely, so crassly, and just turned into a product we consume. We also don't know how to engage each other. And so even on an issue like LGBTQ issues, or let alone LGBTQ and theology issues, like, there's a lot of people going, I don't really understand how to put this in my head. I've not been given. And so art can be a space where now people can engage with feelings, ideas, emotions, stories. And now they can say, well, this makes me feel this. I don't like it. Well, why? Or I love this. Why? And it's the conversation we have around it that can actually be even more beneficial than the art itself. Our relationship is bonded by the experiences we have together, arguing, discussing, agreeing, the band t-shirt we wore, what that meant about us. And we've lost that ability to engage art as participants and viewers and listeners. And it's become just propaganda. It's become something that we just either agree with or disagree with. We don't really know how to engage it. And therefore, it becomes most of the time encouraging this tribalism, as opposed to an opportunity for us to actually listen deeply and go, if you consume
something, all that's to do with consuming it is to enjoy it while you consume it and then shit it out at the end.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
I mean, you either, and in the judgment of it, you either liked it or didn't like it. You either enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it. You have some kind of a very short feeling with that.
Right.
But when you participate with it and you engage something, it is a wildly different experience.
All the chisels I've dug, carving idols of stone that have crumbled like sand 'neath the waves. I recklessly built left all my dreams in the sand, just to watch them all wash away. And through another day, another trial, another chance to reconcile, to want to seize past all I see. And reaching out my weary hand, I pray that you would understand. You're the only one who's faithful to me. You're the only one who's faithful to me.
We're going to step away from my chat with Jennifer Knapp for just a moment, but we'll be right back after this. And now, back to my conversation with Jennifer Knapp.
If I give my life, if I lay it down, can you turn this life around, around? Can I be made clean by this offering of my soul? Can I be made whole if I give my life, if I lay it down? Can you turn this life around and around? Can I be made clean by this offering of my soul? Can I be made whole
Tell me about going back to Kansas and reapproaching that record, re-engaging those songs. Why do that? What was it like for you as a person, as the person who did that 25 years ago, right? What was it like to sing those songs again? What was it like in your body? What was it like, you know, in your mouth and your head and your heart? Like,
Yeah, I could go on for hours, and I've done so much talking about this record and some of the physical surprise, but I love where you were at and talking about, I'm going to go back to the consumer and art thing, because it's really intriguing to me, and it's been something I'm surprised about Kansas, and I think one of the reasons why it felt safe for me to go back and approach Kansas is that there's something about that record that has stood out in its history, in the history, in the community of all the other records inside of particularly the late 90s and early aughts kind of Christian records that are out there. And it's been a little bit of a mystery to me, because I think even as an artist, sometimes we're so familiar with our own music, we see it for what it is. It's just a familiar sister you're happy to punch in the jaw. So you don't really love her and respect her the way sometimes that everybody else does, but there's something about, I'm so afraid to say it out loud because it's worth acknowledging, I think, what that record has done and what that record means to a lot of people. It has become a work of art that, and what you're talking about, people begin to face it, and the community narrative begins to build up and around some of the things that people create, like a museum piece. But there's this unique quality about this record that, for me, kind of, on a personal level, I kind of go, that song's not that good. The production of this record wasn't that great. Why did this record even succeed? Because it shouldn't have. Nobody wanted to play it on the record. I mean, this record in and of itself is actually an incredibly uncelebrated record that has continued to defy the economics of where it came from. Like, it shouldn't have been a successful record. Right. Nobody wanted to put it on their shelves, and it's largely been a fan-driven record. Like, it went gold. Like, it went gold mostly because people bought so many double copies. Like, it wasn't like, I don't think there's like...
We did our part.
Right. People wore them out and bought it again and again and again and again. I mean, it's, I bought Tracy Chapman's Fast Car record 100 times, and now it's digital, and I still buy it occasionally because I can't find it on my computer. I don't know. But I think that's something about, what I'm thinking about are the people that have responded to it and why they carry it around with them, even when they've moved on from their religious experience. There are people who don't necessarily even want to sing a song about Jesus, but it's connected to them, and it's been a piece of work that has been in their back pockets. I mean, these are what people tell me over and over again, or they're remembering a pivotal moment in their lives where they were really digging deep and trying to figure out who they were. The narrative or the soundtrack that goes with that is this record, and it means something to them. And there's one or two recognizable themes in and around that project, but I get to see all the people. I mean, white people, brown people, like so many countries of the world where this record has been. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Like, it's literally been to just about every country and is playing somewhere on Spotify in Kazakhstan. Like, it's weird. Sure, it's probably a white Christian missionary who doesn't know I'm a lesbian, but, I'll take it. But there's something about art, like the experience that people talk to about these sounds in this collection are not something that maybe they did start consuming. Maybe they got in a stocking stuffer because their mom said they should listen to Christian music, and somebody who wasn't a lesbian who was like Melissa Etheridge. Oops. I'm so humbled by it because I don't really think it's the best of my work. But when I listen to it, like, I see the aspirations of all I've ever wanted to be as I'm growing up. And I think is kind of a weird thing that happens in that record too, is that a lot of other people were having that experience. Even going back to early days, is like, we weren't in church, but we were church in that collective group of people that were challenging one another to find the better angels of our nature, to find a world that was rich and beautiful and colorful and vibrant, and what we could play with and play around and make.
Well, it's time to get down on my knees and pray. Lord, undo me. Put away my flesh and bone till you hold the Spirit through me, Lord. Undo me.
I think all of that kind of shows up in little ways in some of those lyrics, and people were having that. So to go back and do that, I think, at least for me, the safety in doing that was a little bit against what you're saying. It was a little bit going, yeah, this record succeeded. The narrative was that I was really successful in Christian music. I quit in 2002 feeling like an absolute failure. I didn't do this and I didn't do that, and I wasn't being paid that way. Everybody was telling me, oh, you can't do a tour because nobody will buy a ticket to you. Like, everything I got behind the scenes was that I'd really actually failed. That there's this revisionist history to me that I was successful inside of that career and impactful. And I think that's good. Some of those records have kind of proven to be that way because I'm still having to kind of answer for it and talk about it. That even people tried to even block that out after I came out. Like, even like bookstores who weren't selling it anymore going, we're just going to take it out of the catalog. You won't even be able to back order it or anything like that. They wanted the record to not exist anymore because they didn't like me anymore, didn't agree with where I was theologically. And I'm part of going back and re-engaging that record going, it's really hard to kill a piece of art that we own together.
Right.
It's easy to kill something, a product. It's really easy to kill a product. Once you sell all the copies of it and nobody wants to replicate it anymore, nobody cares. It's dead. It's obsolete. But art is one of those weird things that we create as humanity that can stand centuries when it expresses something uniquely about our experience, whether it's a Roman Colosseum, and weirdly, like, what do you do with music? A song that can last centuries and that we can find later as this extraordinary thing does something when but it's us. We share it together. And if we don't know that, I'm kicking in. If we don't know that, if we don't know that it still requires, I can write a song and it's great, but it still requires you. It still requires all of us to go and engage it. That's the part I wanted to celebrate about the people who knew and had this record. When they come to a room where I'm playing, it's amazing. I'm so proud of the people that I meet and I see. Like, it's not just an idea that the work that we do and the engagement and the acceptance we have of our spiritual selves and our kind of crafting our own spirituality and our own uniqueness and gifting inside of all those things. It's not just an idea that individual work makes a difference in the greater world. It really does. I mean, I see it night after night after night. I have like the most extraordinary audience. They're and I don't mean this in a wild way, but you could be a truck driver or a therapist. I have doctoral people, like all kinds of, but they're deeply inquisitive and curious human beings that are enriching the world. They're not just consuming their own world, and they're not wanting to just consume their faith. And that's, if anything, that's been an argument that I've had inside of Christian music, is I didn't want to just create something for you that you could just consume and that sounded good and was popular. If I'm writing in and around my faith, I'm working something out. And I think so that's been the joy. Like, I didn't know that Kansas was that. You know, every artist is really great. Every once in a while you create something and it teaches you something along the way, and it gets way bigger than you are.
Create me clean, oh God. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. To my prayers you've always given heed. Blessed
So Steve, you just produced Jennifer's 25th anniversary total reimagining of the Kansas record. So first, what was your awareness of the original record and of Jennifer, just in a nutshell, as an artist?
I had not heard the record, but I remember her from those days, 20 years ago, and was always impressed with her as a performer. But I have to admit, I wasn't familiar with, I had not heard the record in its entirety. We ran across each other at a songwriting festival, and she was there also on the same stage, and I ended up accompanying her, playing percussion with her. And we were connected, and we hadn't seen each other in 20 years since she'd worked on this City on a Hill album with me. And we just had a great time together. We found out that we lived close to each other, and I'm like, why don't we be friends? How come we're not friends, And she's like, yeah, we should be friends, And her and her partner Kaz was there, and I hit it off with Kaz too. So anyway, a few months later, she called me out of the blue and said, hey, I'm thinking of redoing this Kansas album. I knew that Kansas was hugely successful. I remember she was New Artist of the Year at the time.
Right.
And so I thought, man, that was a big deal. Why would, So I was a little, and then I did listen to it. I mean, I said, I think, I agreed to do it, for her, but I went home and listened to it, and wow, it was really, really good. I mean, really well done. You know, it was 20-some years ago, you know, but so it was stylistically maybe a little, you know, we would all do something different now, but it was good. And I thought, man, that's good. I was intimidated by the challenge. But the approach I took was like, look, let's do it like we did, like we met at that songwriters thing. You play guitar and sing, and I'll accompany with you the little percussion. We'll do that first. And then we'll bring in players around it, and it can be as intimate as it needs to be. If that sounds good just like that, maybe you play guitar, acoustic guitar, and sing a song by yourself. Maybe that's the way it'll go. So we did not refer to the original record. We just, is like, here's Jen's song. You know, I did them in sequence. We did the whole record from the first song in the sequence of the record, so it had a flow. You know, I brought in first Chris Donahue on bass. He played the entire album in one day, started with the first song, and we flowed through it. It was a long day. And then I brought in Phil Madera, came in for a day and put some keys where it felt appropriate. Never overplaying. We just didn't want to put a lot of paint on the canvas. Just keep it central. The song is the song, and Jen was singing better than ever. I mean, she's been singing all this time, and she plays great too. She's locked in. It was easy to play percussion with her strumming because she's locked in. So you got a great internal clock. So that was, and then I brought in my favorite musician that I know is Matt Slocum from Sixpence, and he played all the electric guitars. And except one, Jen did play electric on one. We convinced her to do it. But Nate played cellos, and that's it. You know, we did it in just a little more than a week, and we went and did background vocals. Dan Hazeltine came and sang on 2 songs, which was really cool, great. Everyone brought a lot of heart. Everyone brought a lot of heart to it, and we just had a good time. And I did become really good friends with Jen. I think she's absolutely a delightful person, funny, and it was easy. Let me tell you, it was so easy to make this record, and I didn't know how it would be received because I knew people loved that first record, and so I'm so thankful that it seems to be really well received.
Right.
And I'm so thankful that she asked me to do it.
All these years, too many head to think clear. Some say, where's my crystal ball? Some men play the lottery, making bets against a government economy. They say I'd rather be rich than be alive at all. But many my circumstances fall. It won't be hard to tell where place their resolve. Some trust in chariots, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. To each his own won't lead you home. It probably never will.
Some folks that I think are in this process of reevaluating or rethinking, they just end, they quit. They stop the whole process of thinking the deep thoughts, of diving into the deep end of the pool. And that's the sad thing for me is that when instead of it, and that's why I don't even like the term deconstruction, because it still borrows so much from industrialism. It's like, why are we tearing something down and building? Like, that's so mechanical.
Yeah.
But that's still what
in that
that's
phrase,
a term that
I've
wins.
been deconstructing my entire Christian life.
Exactly.
If that's the motif,
But for you to go back and do that, tell me a little bit, and we'll wrap up, but tell me a little bit about in that world you were in, and I'll give voice to the hard question that a lot of evangelicals would have, that the friends that kind of formed you, the friends that brought you into faith would probably, some of them at least I would imagine, would have a really hard time wrapping their head around, okay, well, if Jen is gay, if Jen has come out, then she's not a Christian, right? Because you can't do those two things at the same time. So what do you say to people, good-hearted, well-intended people that are going, I don't understand why she doesn't just say I'm not a Christian anymore and just be a lesbian? Why work so hard to synthesize your faith, why not just chuck it? Like so many, I mean, there's even people that aren't gay, they're just done with it for political reasons or whatever else. Why are you working so hard that you go back and get a master's degree in theology? Why are you so interested in this faith?
I ask myself that every day.
So help me understand why you're clinging so tenaciously to this thing. And
I don't know that I'm clinging. Like I'm the weird thing about the way that I actually live my life with the things that I live very open-handed. Like I really want my faith to fly away some days. Or Christianity, the tradition and all of its culture and trappings and all that. I'm like, go, fly, be free. You don't need me. Like, I don't want you. Or go away, lassie. Nobody loves you
here. Or that
Sting
song, if you love something, set it free.
Exactly. All those things, my resolution to like those types of questions is I actually don't accept the premise. And even in a weird...
Tell me which premise don't you accept?
Well, the idea that it's even that kind of basic one, right? Like, why don't you, why get yourself tangled up? And I would say this to anybody. Why tangle yourself up in knots to kind of live with something that is incompatible with the other? Okay. Right? So I don't agree that they're incompatible because I wasn't tied. Like, I've not necessarily had to work that way. But what I would... And I find that question so utterly boring because you haven't been listening and you haven't been engaged in my life. Like art, you've been consuming me and you've been around or you've witnessed it, but you haven't actually engaged. If you have engaged me or my community, or you'll kind of go, oh wow, there's something like that's not the question. Gayness, whatever. Like that's weirdly about my body parts of somebody else. It's so bizarre. But the bigger question is to me is like, what does it mean? And this I've been asking for a long, why am I still engaging in this space? Because this is the space that actually gives me an understanding of not just a discipline and a model and accesses to people of wisdom inside of that, but also additionally culturally ways to act out in art, to implement that wisdom, to create in that space, to be able to toy with that wisdom. I remember a long time ago, this was back in the critique days when I was really going through the gauntlet of, can you be a gay and Christian and justify yourself? And I'm like, I'm done. I don't justify myself. It is not an exercise that intrigues me. What intrigues me is who have I been created to be? And that is, the mode that I go out about answering that question in my life is, its mother tongue is Christianity. It's not the only one, but it is the space that's my theological default and it's a very engaging space for me. That may not sound very religious or very Christian to some people, and I'm fine with that. Because ironically, I would go, if you think being gay is the statement or the thing that you see in my life that makes me questionably Christian, let's talk about some of the theological arguments that I might have that really challenge, especially the evangelical spaces. Right. There are some things I feel like, as a history buff of Christianity a bit, I'm like, wow, there's some things we've never really codified or really gotten into that have been left on the dust pile of our thought and our history that have really lost out to some really terrible ideas that have been really damaging, like original sin. Don't get me started. So I'd be like, that's not the question for me. Right. But stop. I'm not trying to answer something definitive. To me, God is almost like art. Like, it's the closest thing I have to say is it's not for me to tell you what the meaning of it is. It is a level of engagement. I'm not just there to consume or be told or be crafted or to be shaped into something. I will be shaped by it if I'm engaged with it. I mean, Picasso, I had an experience in Europe with Picasso. I was going to all these little museums that were just, he was a prolific kind of guy, and he was definitely not a really great example of artists in our time because he was starting to produce his art and making a lot of money doing it. But the small curated things, and as I watched the evolution of him as an artist, when I really got into his work, to watch him from his early days of being able to paint a portrait perfectly all the way through Cubism, and to be able to watch a piece develop like the Mademoiselles in MoMA, to watch that evolution, all of a sudden I went, oh, this is what art is. And that you have to engage in that. And to me, spirituality is like that. It's not judging it, whether it's right or it's wrong. The only thing that you get out of that is hypocrisy. It's a judgment of right or wrong. It's a punishment or praise. It's not enrichment. And I think there's something more to our experience than that. And I think there's more to divinity to that. And I'm fine with mystery, by the way. Mystery is an amazing thing.
Right.
But even to appreciate mystery, love is a mystery sometimes to me. And I think I know how to love, but every once in a while you have those days and you're like, that was it. Or even, I did that. Or I got that. Like, I experienced, like, you are loving me right now and you know it. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And the next day you're like arguing over the dishes, you know? You're like, oh, like, I don't know anything. But that's part of the joy of it.
His grace is sufficient for me. His grace is sufficient. His grace is sufficient for me. His grace is sufficient. When I'm down, I search heaven to stay. I'm looking for new regrets. Sometimes I forget that His grace is sufficient for me. That it's deeper, wider than I can conceive. When I'm down, I search heaven to stay. New regrets. Sometimes I forget that His grace is sufficient for me. That it's deeper, wider than I can conceive. His grace is sufficient for me.
This is my thing about that keeps me coming back, I think, to some point, is befuddles me. It's like, at some point in time, if you really want to know someone, know something, experience something, you have to be with it. You have to engage it. You can't just consume it. You can't just eat it. Sometimes you're quiet. Sometimes you talk to it. You inquire. You rage against it. You yell at it. You cuss and you scream and you kick at it. And then you let it hold you.
Yes.
You know,
Because at least it's there.
it's there. You
Yes.
you allow it to live.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if I push it back around to like an LGBT question, going, and I'll finish with this. Like, there was a guy who said, "What if you're wrong?" He's like, "What if you're wrong about God God being okay with your life?" I said, "Well, then I'll probably be the first to know that. Like, but I'm open to what if I'm wrong. I'm open to it, because if I'm wrong, it will show itself out. It will not be a fruitful way for me to live. It will die. I will die on the vine." I have a faith in that regard, and that's like a theological, if anything, does God work in this way? This idea that, when what I love about Christianity is it's the difference between life and death. If there's any binary at all, like, that's all. It's either we're living or we're dead. And I want to be living. And the victory over that is all of the things, not just breathing and walking, but what is what I'm doing give life? And so if I'm wrong about it, I don't think I'm wrong about it at all. Like, I have more joy in my life than I've ever had. And it's not hedonistic. It's not consumer. And if you don't understand that, then you don't know what it means to not consume. Like, and our arts are critical to that. And, you know, why it's important, I think, even that we have people who are fluent at any level of mastery or understanding or holders of wisdom, that have that wisdom come out in their art, whether it's painting or politics or social justice or religion or family or horses or the masters, the people who are the wisdom keepers of those spaces have to in some way create and transmit and share. And I think the more that you participate in that, the older. I don't have any children, but I sometimes imagine it's like all you want is your child to grow up. Not to change the world for some pride, but for them to be engaged in the world, that they are whole and released and prospering and just going bananas. And, you know, not changing the world because they're great, because they got their name on a plaque. Who cares?
Right.
So turn on the light and reveal all the glory. the light, in the light. Oh, I am not afraid to let your light shine bright in my life, in my life. Oh, I think kind of going around to the Kansas project, it's weird. And going back to that project, you know, there are things that I wouldn't write theologically or lyrically in the same way anymore. But what I was really shocked, and I share this with a lot of other people in and around this thing, it's like, wow, I see what that kid was working on.
Right.
And it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, good for her. Like, good for her that she toughed it out.
Yeah.
Good for her that she asked that. Good for you, you had that question. Yeah, it was unnerving, unsettling, rebellious, awful, terrible, miserable, great, all at the same time. Or look at you, you thought you knew shit. You don't know anything. All of it. But to see the glimmers of, you know, to not be afraid of where we've come from and to be able to see that and rejoice that those labors are worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Kansas for me as a young writer was definitely kind of getting into the culture shock of Christianity, fighting those spaces of going, yes, I want to be in this space, and I also don't want this space to be an enclosed one. I just don't. I wouldn't have articulated it that way then.
Right.
But to see, I think what pleases me in that is not something that's in my mind, or in like anything that I have anything to do, like just to see something recognizable, that I've always kind of been this way. You know, the parts of us, I think it particularly as a queer person inside of space where there's a lot of conversation in like who we were born to be, right, and what we choose and how we choose to act. I think there's a lot of that, but it's pretty amazing the personalities. There's a uniqueness to each one of us, even when we're born. Like, I've had a lot of kids and siblings and nieces and nephews. They're not wildly different from who they were when you started seeing their personalities at 6 months.
Yeah.
They may choose to do different things, but they're still them. And that's the essence of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who is the essence of John? Who is the essence of Jen, of Michelle? Who is the essence of each one of our listeners? That to me is like a spiritual question that religion can help us answer, can assist us in helping us answer, but cannot tell us, cannot answer it for us. It's a mechanism. It is something that can help us along the way, but it doesn't own that way. It is hopefully a source of wisdom. And that's the joy I see when I kind of look back in time, is to see something that I might be embarrassed about, like in terms of like bell-bottom pants or a bad haircut in that kind of sense, but it's recognizable. And of all the things that I've been in trouble for through the years, and being myself and being curious, like I feel like I can now say with 30 some odd years of experience, that's good advice. Like, to be able to understand and know, work and labor hard to know what your voice is and what your vision is, even as you experiment that along, and create it, like build it, engage with it, interact with it. Don't just try and shape it into something else, or don't just try to be a product that everybody else consumes. Resist it.
Right.
Resist the idea that you as an individual should be consumed in social media by other people, and that's what develops your personality, or that's what shows what a great person you are. No. You should be able to stand alone in a room in that, and that will stand the test of time. It will be the same. There'll be a continuity between that. It won't be an alienate. Most people who travel on that path, I don't think, you can change the fashion and the way that it sounds sometimes, but there's still the continuing thread of the uniqueness of who we are in our spirit. Surely the performance of these songs are going to be different, because I'm different. My body's different. My level of mastery with the instrument's different. What I do with my voice. The way I probably don't even see these songs lyrically to be able to get through it. Like, it's coming out of an aged, what is this aged cheddar going to taste like this time around? It's not a young cheddar anymore on a cracker. It's now an aged cheddar. What is that going to be like? And the record is like a full 5 minutes longer.
Interesting.
And the arrangements are mostly the same. But the delivery of it, it's so funny. So we were just listening, Steve and I were just listening to the test pressing of the vinyl last night at my place. And I had a vinyl of the original Kansas. And it did get mastered. We did like 100 records. Goatee pressed 100 exclusive vinyl for us for Kansas in the last 10 years or so.
Like I said, we only did like 100 or so of them, and I didn't want to listen to Kansas that I've never even opened that vinyl. The vinyl that I have of the original Kansas recording still was sealed up, so I had to open it yesterday because I was wanting to A/B it against what we just did, because I hadn't gone back and listened to the record. Holy crap! It sounds like this little chipmunk on speed, like especially because it was on a turntable. Like the record is so fast.
That's what I was thinking when I listened to it again. It's like, I love the original, but this new one, I've listened to it multiple times, and I just sat again yesterday and listened to it again. I'm like, damn, this is just, it's like a saddle that it feels comfortable.
A good pair of leather boots.
Yeah, it's just like, oh man, it's the
funny,
tone and everything.
When you said the thing about, when you brought up Tracy Chapman earlier, it was funny that you said that, because my feeling when I walked in and heard your voice singing those songs, like singing them now as who you are now, and the age and the experience, and just the what happens with a voice as it ages, all the great things, reminded me of the moment that we're all looking at the hands on the guitar during, was it the Grammys, and then it pans up and it's like, it's her, she's there.
Oh, yeah.
And the voice, and it was like the richness, singing those same words, but that richness and time and experience and wisdom, that like, even though she's singing the same words, it felt the same and different at the same time. Well, richer. And so even though I feel like kind of what you were saying about, maybe I would have changed some of the lyrics if I would have been allowed to or whatever, there's still kind of a really cool thing, maybe because, that we know, I mean, I've learned a lot about your journey, but I feel like I've kind of known a lot about your journey. And I don't know, just knowing that and then hearing your voice now sing those things, I feel like I can read into it.
But we all relate to, I mean, this work, that's really what one of the things I really was hopeful that people would be able to have an opportunity to see themselves that way. To see what I was seeing, like the light bulb that goes off in my own life, that's great. That's personal and that's for me and it's stunning and it's great. But what I want to do is put it back in my art. And like, I didn't know how to rewrite, I wouldn't even begin to know how to write that into a story. But I was like, well, if we're going to go back and do this record, hopefully if it shows up in my performance of it is different, because my voice has changed, my body has changed, but the girl is still the girl. Mm-hmm. There's still something, when I play those songs, even if I roll my eyes occasionally to some things that I've written, I can still tell they're me.
Yeah.
And I think there are some songs that are in our lives and our soundtracks that are still us. And what I wanted, and I didn't say this before I did the project, but it was really the tipping point of why I said, okay, I'll go back and engage, and I'll do this record. Because it's a little bit like, who does that? Like, it was weird, and I didn't know how I'd feel about going and doing weeks of just singing Christian music. Ugh. I sweated some days. But the tipping point was like, I hope I want that to be embedded in this. I want that to be, I hope that you'll see it in your life, that you'll be able to, that it won't be about me or it won't be about a record, that you will go to that display in the museum and that you will have nothing but a sigh or an exhale or an awe or a sense of peace or something just like of who you are and of what your life was. That's what I really wanted. Like, I hoped. I have no idea how. You just kind of hope that you just make it live and that it will do it. Because I don't know how you do that. I don't know how. But didn't say a word about it. It just only had talked about this with everybody as just like celebrating Kansas 25 and we've come a long way, and that was about it. It wasn't until it got out and people heard it and they didn't have any media telling them what to think about it. They just listened to it and just people pouring out their experiences with what they had, like it was a spiritual experience that they were having about them and their lives and their person. No one was going, oh my God, Jen, you really nailed it this time. Nobody was praising me or like, oh my, I mean, there was some of that, and that's nice to hear, but by and large, like 80-90% of the reactions to this were people. I got to witness people in the museum watching the piece of art on the wall and watching them walk away just going, that's going to take me a minute. Mm-hmm. This is going to be with me for a while. And even like as we went back and listened to the project last night on vinyl, I was like, wow, like there's something special there. And I don't know, it's bizarre because it's not a project or it's not a bunch of lyrics, and it certainly didn't come from a person, I think, that warrants it. Yeah. You know, it's so unexpected.
You know those like poems that I don't have an example of one, but it starts with a line and then you go through this whole story in the poem and it ends with the same line that it started with.
And you've gone like through a journey so far away.
Now that line feels so different, but also beckons, you know, to where you started. That's kind of how I feel about this. Like with those of us that are listening to it, we've been on a journey since then.
Yeah.
So we're listening to it again going, well, I know how I felt when I heard this the first time and what it made me celebrate or think about or cry about or whatever. And now I've been on this journey, and there's something cool about having that same sort of familiar voice, but that's also kind of gone on the journey and aged along with us, and saying that it's like you're saying the last line. You know what I mean?
It's a pretty amazing experience to hear. Like if a Christian came up to you, for example, and said, you know, you don't have to be condemned from the laws of sin. Pastor says that to you. Some asshole on the street corner on a soapbox, you know, turn or burn, get right with the Lord. Somebody says that to you. And there's a difference of saying, going, I don't live a life of shame anymore. Like, I don't have to be condemned. I am not ruled by the same laws. You've been looking the frameworks of the physics kind of in the wrong way. And it's a weird paradigm shift. And in some way, I'm like, I'll hold to that line. I can hold to that line. There's no condemnation. Like, that is the utter joy. What I've been trying to do for 30 plus years.
Stop this foolish pride of mine that dares to drag me far away from you. When I try to do it my way, I always lose your point of view. Oh, well, I don't have to be condemned. Jesus saved me from the laws of sin. If I fall, I'll try again. With the Spirit as my guide, no, I'll never have to hide again.
And shame on you if you think you can get it done in one line or some little, you know, cheesy Christian bumper sticker quote. I mean, a life-altering experience. Like, the best poets, the best writers, the reasons why we are still deeply grappling with the language and how to express ourselves and still writing countless songs about love is because there's so much there. It's really rich. And there's just not one way to say it. But if you think there is and there's only one way, like, shame on you. Like, it's just...
Well, you're making propaganda or wallpaper.
Yeah, you'll run. I will just go, you know, it's a lollipop, and you're going to run out, and all you're going to be left with is a stick. You know, like...
that doesn't taste good.
Yeah, but here's something, like, nourishing doesn't have to be just a bland carrot. Like, it's something that really emboldens you and actually makes you stronger and makes the world around you. It doesn't kill everything in order to live, you know? So, I don't know, but it reminds me of, like, that. So I'm grateful at the same time, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to just not even tinker at all with any of the lyrics. It's just going, it's important to leave that in its place. I think it's important to kind of see its original version. Not every artist would say that, but I don't want to change the original version of it. I didn't want to rewrite the history. Like, I wanted, kind of again going back to the big T, little t. Like, if it's true, what does it mean then? That therefore, you know, Paul says that therefore there's now no condemnation in Christ. I'm like, what does that mean? And a bunch of dudes in a Western consumeristic have tried to answer that and give you the question, original sin, that's what it means. We've been bought and paid for. It's atonement theology. And I'm like, oh, don't get me started. I mean, I could do an hour on that. But as an artist, and even in our own lives, I think every artist is somewhat exercising something that, yes, music or a song or a record might be the manifestation of that. But I still do that work anyway. My therapist sometimes calls me neurotic, sometimes often esoteric, but it's an examined life. And I really am, I love examining not just myself, but the deeper questions. And if somebody says, therefore now there is no condemnation in Christ, I mean, I'm like, all right, let's see. Let's see the end of that. So to me, it's not a question of whether you're gay or whether you did a particular thing or an act, whether that is or isn't a sin, is not the point.
Lord, come with your fire, burn my desires, refine me. Lord, my will has deceived me. Please come and free me. Come rescue this child. For I long to be reconciled to you. For I long to be reconciled to you. Refine me, refine me. Refine me, refine me.
What is next for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a book I'm supposed to be writing that I haven't. I had a very good time during COVID that I had all this time on my hands I should have been doing. So obviously the Kansas projects got done. I'm spending a lot of 2024 being Christian and kind of tapping into my theological stuff. I've been. You
just finished that degree.
Right? I did finish my degree. That was a while ago now, but I got my master's in theological studies from Vanderbilt. It took me a few years to get over my imposter syndrome, I think, a little bit. But COVID was really fun because I did a lot of podcasts during that time. So I practiced a lot over in expressing some of my more obviously heretical to evangelical kind of theological things, and I've been practicing that for a while. So somewhere in the future, I'd like to get that into its book form and really spend less time talking and more time kind of writing some of those things down. But that being said, a lot of this year I've been engaging in that, doing a lot of podcasts in and around Kansas, kind of being the wise old woman a little bit, working on a podcast we're just trying to get them all up in the can and then kind of launch it, right? So we're kind of loose in that space. So I'm doing Patreon a lot and engaging in those spaces. Artistically, I'm really getting pushed into the end of the alley of something that I think is going to be a musical expression of this faith conversation. There's a real loss of the other parts of the art missing from this space, especially Christian conversations in and around this. There's a lot of worship music and purpose-built art, but we're still missing that. And the critique is I don't see a church that looks like me, so I don't go to church. Well, of course it doesn't look like you because you're not there.
Well, that's good.
And kind of on the same veins of the art. So I'm kind of toying with what that will mean for me, and I don't know that I'm looking at that as a big public project. And then on creatively on my table too is also the fact that I really am itching to go and write some new music. But I really haven't had a minute. I'm just doing so much, maintaining my daily stuff. I'm going on a cruise later on this year where I've got to learn all my records and play it in 1 week, so I'm going to do that project and all these kind of weird side hustles and trying to keep the boat afloat. I'm busy rowing, but I am getting really hungry to dive in, get lost in some creative projects. So I think I'm going to be writing the next album I write. It's probably going to be in the vein of examining why I've been so hung up on how old I am and
have you turned 50 yet?
Yeah, I turned 50. I've been saying I was 50 for a year or two before, but
I was going to say because you're just a few years behind me. That's what I remember.
but I mean, this year's been interesting because with the Kansas thing coming out, and there's been an interesting shift in the way people speak to you. Mm-hmm. So it changes the way you see yourself in the world. And what does that mean when you're, can I say, out of fucks? Like, when I was a young woman, like the kind of the thing that I remember are like, how do old ladies walk around with these hairs on their chin? Like, what's up with that? One, they can't see it because their eyesight's shot. And two, if they feel it, they kind of like, well, I don't care what you think about me. Like, it's hair, deal with it. Right. You know, I'm a little bit like, I'm appreciating and very much enjoying that part of age where you kind of know who you are a little bit more and you're not kind of chasing some insecurity. I'm really loving that.
I think about the waves of time, how they roll across my shoulders, thinking no clock is gonna get the best of me. Minutes threaten through the years to cover wrinkles with my tears across the face with straining eyes to see. They're looking for the peace that passes all understanding in a world crazed with fear. They say that I am much too demanding to want a better place in here. So I'm going to visions of perfect came to me, and I dream of heaven, a promise in which I believe.
I'm amazed that I still get to be doing this. I mean, this is not an easy time for musicians across the board. Right. I mean, clubs are hard to get into. It's just a nightmare. It's like live music. It's a little bit of the consumer thing. Like, I went to a live show the other day. I was amongst 300 people that were staring at an artist who I think they enjoyed, but it was like they were watching TV. Yeah. I was like, the last time, and it's been a long time since I've been down and actually gone to a show, and I was just like, wow, this is so wildly different than when I would go to shows, when I was a kid and going to shows. Like, it were 300 different individuals, 300 different reasons why I don't want to judge it, but it looked like, yeah, they were consuming. It didn't look like it was an experience they were all collectively having. I was trying to put my finger on it. But that's part of, like, where it shapes my lifestyle. Like, now, like, it's a dumb business to get into. It's not, despite what people think, just because everybody knows you doesn't mean it's incredibly lucrative. But at the same time, I mean, I'm genuinely grateful to be building, like, it's part of just the way I live my life. Like, yeah, and I have a little bit of, I do hustle and I do work on the music side of it. I don't make no bones. I came from a contemporary, like, I came from an economic, professional component of the way I do my music. But at the same time, like, I don't want to just be a slave to some bigger idea and some bigger narrative. Like, mm-hmm. I look at it, I really am most intrigued, and I don't know if satisfied is the word because it's hard work, but I am most engaged with building a life rather than, I don't need an Apple and iWatch. I don't need, like, I don't have a mortgage right now, and I don't have, like, people are confused because I'm a lesbian without a dog. Like, my life won't, like, the choices that I'm making in my life often have things that other people don't have in it. The choices that I make in my life in any given day don't necessarily look what's marketed as to what looks like successful. Or people go, oh, wow, I'm looking at your Instagram feed and you're killing it. I'm like, no, I'm sweating bullets over here. But I was like, that's just a thing. This over here is I haven't not released a record in 7 years now because I don't want to release a record. I haven't had time to write the record. Like, I haven't had actually the time and the money, right, to be able to not work for like whatever 6 months it might take for me to dive into the types of ways that I write, because I write in a particular way. Like, I could write. I mean, I can write some songs for you if you want, but that's not what I want to do. I want to create, and that's different. Right. And you make different decisions based on that. And it's really hard. We live in a world where, what's wrong? You don't have a mortgage. What's wrong? Your kids aren't going to a college. What's wrong? You don't have a brand new car. What's wrong? You don't have the latest $1,500 iPhone. Oh my God, what I wouldn't do for a flip phone. Like, I would love it, because I never return your text anyway. But when you start looking at who you want to be in the world, it's a lot different from like, who am I? Who do I want that person to be in the world, as opposed to what everybody else says you should be? And right. I don't know. I enjoy that. And I'm enjoying that as part, like, aging, and the projects that I'm starting to think about ahead are not necessarily really great projects that I traditionally think of. Like, oh, I need to do a record. I need to put a record out in the next year because I could use the next 12 months of pretty decent revenue, right, to fund the next thing. And now I'm starting to think more in terms of that kind of wisdom, like what I'm thinking about, what creatively I want to put in the direction of a faith community, a church community that's useful, because I'm one of those, am I or am I not like a practitioner of that? Am I not one of the priests with the guitar, so to speak? You know what I mean? Like, it just seems, I don't want to answer that. I don't like that realization, but if I do that and my friends are saying, we need you to do that, and I'm saying, right, I know how to do it, I can do it, and I don't want to, is a really confrontational thing to say. But now I'm starting to kind of ease into saying I'm actually intrigued by it. Yeah. I think what I've been experiencing, the growth that I've had spiritually, is going to have to express itself in that way. Yeah. And I have to spend the time to do it. Like, I have to write those prayers. I have to engage in that. I'm like, all right. It's a practice. Yep. And in our world, you have to make, I think more and more we have to find in our time and energy, we have to make that choice to do it. Yep. Like, my partner was actually gone for a couple of months internationally, and I chose to stay home. And I vowed during that time I was going to get like super high. Like, I was going to like just basically make a bed out of my studio, just like put like a mattress down on the floor, and I'll get a bottle of scotch, some of my little, THC tincture, whatever it was going to take for me to just like let go of whatever I thought. And I'm sorry that it seems that it takes substances. I never even did it. I couldn't even do it. Like, the idea of just like opening myself up to that, like, was such a terrifying idea that I just didn't even. Right. It took so much energy to think about setting up a habitat and where I might actually relax. Like, just that idea alone was like, there's something seriously wrong with you, Jen. So, like, I have to, like, I want to reform that part of my space, because even as an artist, I mean, I will always say, like, every time I sit down and create my body of work, I spend the time and create, like, that misnomer, I think, with creatives, right, that it all just comes to you in inspiration. Well, yeah, I've got 50, 60 ideas that are half inspiration started. It looks like a really messy bedroom, like, right, but I haven't done the hard work of finishing it. So I've got to get into that space and do it. I'm just going to have to weed whack my way and like fight people off to beat them away with sticks and stuff to be able to carve out that time.
From glass alabaster, she poured out the depths of her soul. Oh, foot of Christ, would you wait if her harlotry's known? Falls a tear to darken the dirt of humblest offerings to forgive the hurt. She is strong enough to stand in your love. I can hear her.
Jen, thanks for making time to come over here today and hang out. It's so good to...
It's a super cool excuse just to connect and hang out, man.
We could just, maybe we will. We'll just talk all day, but we'll turn the recorder off.
I know we're on opposite sides of town, but it's a case in point.
At least we're in the same town now.
Yeah, I know. We got to get a fireside chat and get some whiskey going and just have all the conversations that we don't let people listen to.
All right.
But thanks for having me.
All the pennies I've wasted in my wishing well I've thrown like stones to the sea. I have cast my lots, dropped my guard, searched aimlessly for faith to be faithful to me. Through another day, another trial, another chance to reconcile to one who sees past all I see. And reaching out my weary hand, I pray that you'd understand. You're the only one who's faithful to me. You're the only one who's faithful to me.
Thanks, Jen, for spending so much time with us. It's been a minute since I was able to record a podcast conversation in person, and I'm glad it was this one. This show has already run very long, and Jen had so many good things to say that I really don't want to take much more of your time. But if I had anything to add on my little soapbox, it's just that face-to-face conversations are so amazing. I am deeply and profoundly grieved by how social media has degenerated our discussions and dehumanized us. I have seen that happen to Jen and countless others. I've no doubt participated in it myself. Today's example is probably not too stark because it's not like Jen and I had any conflict or issues to deal with. I have admired her work and her heart for a long, long time. But I know there are some who really struggle with issues related to sexuality and faith, and for some, Jen has been reduced to one issue. In my experience, those are things to discuss privately with people you trust, whose discernment you trust, not in public forums. Art in general, and songwriting in particular, can be an excellent tool for working out the questions, cultivating empathy, and expanding understanding. If all it does is tell you what to think, believe, or do, it's probably propaganda. And if the art you consume always agrees with what you already think and believe, you're probably not digging too deep to find the good stuff. Also, it's hard to hate people up close. It's much easier to have empathy and respect for others, even those with whom you disagree, when you see them face to face and hear their voice in person. If you find yourself feeling lots of anger or fear, especially about cultural things, check the media you consume. Is it stoking those fears or encouraging reflection? The thing I love about confessional music, be it folk or blues or soul, is that when I hear an artist share their perspective, honestly, and match those ideas with complementary melodies and harmonies, it enriches my understanding of the human experience. I get to walk in their shoes for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be about agreeing with their positions or beliefs, but I do get to understand their perspectives. Now, to be clear, I have no time for music that dehumanizes. I make no space in my brain or heart for propaganda. When we allow our stories to be reduced to mere issues and complicated matters to be overly simplified, we turn off the parts of our hearts and minds that generate compassion, empathy, and understanding. But when we spend time with each other, listening carefully, there is so much we can learn. And if we are people of faith, and we believe that God is love and that God is in control, then maybe we should have faith in love and trust that God, the all-powerful one, might not need or even want us fighting over what love means. Maybe there is a better way, and maybe part of that better way is to sit down, grab a drink, and listen carefully together. Okay, I'm climbing off my soapbox now. That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thanks again to Jennifer Knapp and her manager Kaz. You can learn more about Jen's music and find info about upcoming shows and more at jenniferknapp.com. And thanks to Michelle for joining us on this episode. Quick plug, if you're a fan of this kind of music, Michelle has been releasing some great stuff you can find on Bandcamp at thewaysidestore.com or on Spotify under Michelle Lynn Thompson. Thanks also to Steve Hindalong for taking some time to talk with me after the Mercyland songwriting retreat. I also want to send a special shout out to our Patreon backers. We could not do this without your help and support. If you would like to join that group, head over to patreon.com/truetunes, or if you'd like to give us a one-time gift, you can find the PayPal link on the show notes page. And thank you for doing all the other stuff. Leave the ratings and reviews at Apple Podcasts, signing up for the email list, subscribe to the weekly Spotify mixtape. It all helps. And please remember, Spotify and Apple are great places to discover new music. But once you discover an artist you love, please support those artists with your dollars and your attention. This podcast was written and produced by me, JJT, with co-production, editing, and sound design by Bruce A. Brown for Gyroscope Productions. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect those of our sponsors or anyone else. Our theme song is a special instrumental mix of Full Circle by Phil Keggy and Rex Paul. The contents of this program are protected by U.S. copyright law and are the intellectual property of Gyroscope Productions, with the exception of songs or clips that are from previously copywritten materials. Everything on this episode is used by permission or under fair use provisions. This program is intended for the private use of our listening audience. Gyroscope Productions can be reached at jjt@truetunes.com or P.O. Box 60401, Nashville, Tennessee 37206. Until next time, this is JJT reminding you to stay tuned and stay true. Peace.